What happens when Wall Street meets visionary innovation? On today's episode of The Escalation, I'm joined by Gabino Roche, CEO and founder of Saphyre, and one of the sharpest minds transforming the future of financial technology. With over 2 decades of experience building cutting-edge products for Fortune 500 firms, Gabino's career spans senior roles at JP Morgan and the NYSE, where he served as Managing Director of Application Development. He's also a former McKinsey consultant and was the head of product at Clariant Global, a fintech consortium backed by industry giants like JP Morgan, Goldman Sachs, and DTCC. In 2017, Gabino founded Saphyre with a bold idea: to revolutionize client onboarding and pre-trade readiness through AI technology, and to use it to automate data sharing and document flow across counterparties with established trading relationships. Today, Saphyre powers some of the world's largest financial institutions, ensuring they're always ready to trade with real-time solutions for real-time settlement and unlocking some serious revenue potential. This is a conversation about innovation, disruption, the grit behind the glamour of entrepreneurship, and what it really takes to rewire the traditional pipes of banking and finance. Thank you for being here. And today I wanted to talk about not only the Saphyre endeavor, but also the passion behind it. I wanted to make sure that our listeners get a little bit more of the insight, what it's really like behind the scenes of running a fintech company, your journey to where you are today, and maybe they can learn something new about AI and a couple of other things and stories that you may wish to share. So let's dive right into it. I think I just wanted to kick off with knowing a little bit more why banking and finance.
I think for the folks watching this is it may look glamorous on LinkedIn or wherever you're seeing news about Saphyre, but there's a real hustle and there's a phrase I've been using with people. So for every good post you may see on LinkedIn or press release, just know that there are like 20 fires that we're like putting out that no one sees, or at least the team is aware of. And there is no, I think people think it's success, but there's I don't know what it is. It's a journey. You say the endeavor. That's our tagline, right? The Saphyre endeavor, but it doesn't end. It's actually perseverance and persistence. And you asked me, why finance? I have to go back in history a little bit because I always was always enamored by Wall Street, and this is going to sound pretty cheesy, but when I grew up, I watched this movie, The Secret to My Success with Michael J. Fox. And I've told the story before, but there's a scene in there like where the company's going down and he's trying to save the company. And I remember as a little kid seeing this. And to me, I thought like, it's amazing. I got to watch that movie again for the secrets to the success, right? And when I rewatched it as an adult, the scene where he convinces investors to invest in the company and where he just basically saves the day is just a music montage of him just like talking about blah, 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 blah. You don't even hear the words. And it's just magic that happened. I'm like, there's nothing about this that taught me anything about the secrets to success. But the allure of investors and finance and stuff and just in general was exciting to me back then. And so I have a long career where I worked. When I graduated college, I started at AT&T corporate. And it's funny, when AT&T was really in the leading edge of technology. And when I graduated, they put me through a program at AT&T where they said, hey, you learn stuff in school, but we need to teach you like how to think. And this is actually important for people who are listening on how to build software products, because it's not like building a table, the chair that we're in, where it's physical and tangible. It's an empirical process. And so how do you validate those things? And one of the things we learned was how to create associations between entities. And I'm not even talking about legal entities. I'm just saying like you'll hear phrases in finance, acronyms, and you don't even understand what they mean, but you have to create associations. And so there's something in technology, and technologists and product managers, business analysts should probably know this when they hear me say it, called entity relationship diagrams. And this was a big thing at AT&T. They talked about one-to-one relationships or one-to-many. But anytime you have many-to-many, that's where things get confusing. So for example, Edita can have an ID. You can have a passport. You can have a driver's license. You can have a tax form that's W-2 in the U.S. I don't know what they have here in the U.K. But and So there's a one-to-many relationship, but there isn't many editors to many IDs, right? It's like, so you try to find ways of normalizing it, and it helps you structure information. So anyways, I worked at AT&T. Then the dot-com era was hitting, and I jumped on the dot-com, and then 6 months later, the dot-com busted along with pets.com and everything else, if you remember that.
Yes.
And I lost my job. And I remember people were like, oh, you know, you sure you want to do this? You should stick with a corporate job and be safe. And my brother and I were helping our family at that time. Our family was struggling. We come from a family of entrepreneurs, and my father's business had gone under. It was in the automotive space. Things were changing.
Right.
So that made me nervous, and I went to work at UPS Corporate, so the actual logistics company, doing technology transformations there. And it's very, very military, very staid. And I wanted to learn new things. And it was very funny because McKinsey at the time was looking for people with experience with startups and Fortune 500 companies and software development, because normally they source people from the Ivy League schools and stuff. And
Exactly.
it was only because of this opportunity that I stumbled upon McKinsey. And I do have to say I credit them because they brought all these thought leaders from how to build products faster to market, agile, Scrum, extreme programming. And I was just like a sponge absorbing all this. I was very amazed. And at the same time, I was hearing all this movement in the finance industry and how trading is done and whatnot. But I kept on hearing about spreadsheets and manual processes. And I said, there's got to be a way we could put more tech to this. I know there's a lot of tech solutions out there. Maybe I can work for a bank to make that happen. And I remember getting an opportunity at the New York Stock Exchange. This is now 2008.
Wow.
November 2008.
Wow.
Obama just gets elected. The financial crisis gets announced. Okay,
Wow.
Bush is on his way out, but Obama's president. They're announcing the TARP funds to save the banks and all this. And I just took a job at the New York Stock Exchange. Now, the good news about the New York Stock Exchange is whether the market goes up or down, they make money, right? So it doesn't matter if the market's going down; they're making money on the spread. So so there's some security there. The craziness was this was a startup division of the firm. It was a little different. And there was so much churn there. Like every 3 months, management was changing. I will tell you, the management team that hired me all got let go 3 days after I started.
Oh my God.
So that's like a scary thing if you think about it. And that was like my foray into the finance industry, because you asked me like, why finance? And I was like, oh my God, can I go back to McKinsey? I don't know if this is for me. But I think the story for your audience a little bit is I said to myself, I'm going to use this as a learning experience, and I'm going to embrace the chaos, because where there's chaos, there's opportunity. And that's something entrepreneurs need to encounter when you're, and I know we're going to get to like fintechs and and how we build things. You are going into uncharted territory. And so there is this unknown. I call it the fog of war. And I try to do this with my team at Saphyre. I'm trying to get people more comfortable with it. I don't know if I play video games, and the analogy of the fog of war is like you can play a military strategy game, and there may be an opponent is in one area, you're in another area on the map, but you don't know where in the map they are. It's black to you, and so you send like a little trooper to go out, a scout, to kind of like find, okay, there's the mountain, there's like, oh, there's Edida and her army, right? And maybe you only got a glimpse. You don't even know that she's already built like an aircraft carrier with an Air Force that's going to come after you or whatever. But it's that fog of war that I'm talking about. You don't know what you're going to encounter. I usually find that when you've removed the fog of war, a lot of folks can act and deploy. But the moment that the landscape changes or it's unknown, there's analysis paralysis. And that was, I think, from that experience, that was one of the learnings. But in any case, I wound up in finance from there, and hopefully that kind of answered that question.
Yeah, absolutely. And how did you end up starting Saphyre? When was that seed planted?
So I left the New York Stock Exchange, and I worked at JP Morgan. And I worked in their custody fund services operations first. So working in the business operations, but rolling out technology solutions to support their clients. And then later they created the corporate investment bank where they pulled in capital markets. So I got involved in some of the KYC reprocess re-engineering work, reviewing some of their onboarding work at the bank. So this cuts across everything. And then JP Morgan made an investment 2 years earlier. This is like, I think 2013 when they did the investment. And then in 2015, they asked me to see if I could help with this consortium. And this is it was called Clariant. This was along with Goldman, State Street, Barclays, Credit Suisse, and DTCC. I think Bank of New York was part of it for a little while. And they were saying, okay, look, you did some good work here at KYC and onboarding. You understand technology, because the whole goal was to create a utility for the industry. All these banks were spending tremendous amount of money trying to address, know your client, know your customer, KYC due diligence. The Dodd-Frank regulations were onerous, at least at the time, and no one understood how to kind of like automate it. But when I got there, and this leads to the question around Saphyre, when I got there, I thought the world worked like JP Morgan. Then I got to see the data from Goldman, from Barclays, from State Street, from Credit Suisse and DTCC, and I realized that we're not speaking the same language.
No.
And you work in this industry, so you know about these standards. Everyone's supposed to be on, I've just said this on a panel on a conference. There's the ISO 2022, and now there's ISO 2025. There's the fixed latest version. There's the ISDA common domain. There is a plethora of standards, and then you have these huge institutions that have acquired other companies. And they're duct taping everything together. There's a mainframe here, a Windows 95 thing there, and so the standards are never fully adopted, and that also then creates these data integrity issues when you're trying to build consortiums or a way for the industry to kind of communicate. And even worse, and I know this from my own personal experience, when you offshore and outsource some of the tech, and those, and I say this with respect, some of them are mercenaries. They're not married to the company's vision, the banks or the buy side, whoever it is. And so if they don't understand a field, they may replicate it, right? And now you're created more disparity on how to normalize that data. The industry should be working like smartphones. So smartphones are not smart, first of all. What's smart about them, though, is they all point to the cloud. So if we don't have two versions of Editor's profile on LinkedIn because we have two smartphones. We have one version in the cloud that we both look at so that I don't need to reconcile it. The finance industry right now is still working in this batch process of like, I'll send you an Excel file, you update at 12 p.m. and then you'll send me yours at end of day. I'll do it at 5 p.m. And there's always like not only a time delay, but there's translation issues and you structure it one way, I structure it another way. But again, if we give an on-ramp to the industry to normalize the data, which the risk was, for example, is, Gabino, how do you normalize that data? Because you don't know it all. And this is the grind part we'll get to is like, well, you have to suffer through the details because we have an opinion on how that information needs to be normalized. And unless you have the courage to actually understand that data for a number of major institutions to start with, and it is daunting, you're not going to get there. And that's why and I know you're familiar with this, there's this habit of, you'll hear this word called reconciliation.
Yeah.
But smartphones and other solutions like them that use the cloud don't do reconciliations because everyone's on a shared version of the data. It's a golden copy in the cloud that everyone can point to without having to go and triple check, quadruple check. And what happens is a lot of these firms go through an event that was disastrous. So the fix in finance, and I know all the folks that are in finance know about the slapping of the hand like attitude of like, now we do this checklist every time in spot C, and we already did it in spot A and B. So now you just add a third time of this triple check to make sure it doesn't happen again. And what that's doing is creating bureaucracy. It doesn't allow people to be, allow the institutions, the organizations to be smarter. And you'll hear me also use this phrase, intelligent automation, because everyone says, we got to automate, we got to STP. And we could do a lot of automation, but it can still be redundant and unnecessary and inefficient and even cause risks around data integrity. So it's about knowing how to recall the relevant stuff so you can automate smartly in one time as opposed to 3 times because of an event that occurred. So that's one part of Saphyre is how do we create a common place where the industry can real-time share a golden copy of data, client account data, get the clients to self-serve it, and then use it in pre and post-trade. And what happened is the predicate, as I was telling you, was this KYC utility, was just for KYC. And all these firms that were spending a lot of money didn't know they wanted to spend money on another solution at the time.
Mm.
And so that led me to pursue onboarding, because if this is for entrepreneurs. If you're trying to sell a product, you got to think about the selfish interest of your customers.
Yes.
My customers primarily were the banks first, but I'm not. The banks, to me, they don't see themselves as a client to Saphyre, right?
Mm.
So what I have to do is get their clients to care about this.
Mm.
And that's where you saw us go out to these large institutions on the buy side,
Yes.
because there's only my twin brother, my co-founder, myself, right at the time. Like, we don't have an army of salespeople to go out to a number of buy sides to be meaningful. So we had to convince the largest institutions to say, hey, do you want to do this one time with Bank A, Bank B,
Wow.
Bank C, Bank D? Do you want it one and done, and then remembered for future like occurrences and maintenance events? They're like, yeah, that'd be great if you could just do this in one shot. It's somewhat embarrassing, but this is the humbling thing, and probably no one remembers this but me and my circle of friends, my brother certainly. I used to have a mobile app business,
Okay.
and I did this in parallel while I was at the New York Stock Exchange
Oh, tell me.
and while I was at JP Morgan.
Okay.
And the agreement at those firms was that I cannot build these any apps in the finance industry, that it had to be for other industries. And that was one thing I just tell people who are entrepreneurs or fintechs, like, there's a fallacy that when you work at a job, people tend to view themselves as owned or as slaves to that company or job, right? But in reality, I mean, if you're brand new out of college, and you have a lot to learn, but there's so many people who have experiences that they have to view themselves as professionals who are bartering their time and expertise to the company by getting a paycheck and also learning new things at the current place that they're working at. As opposed to, I'm an employee or slave. It is more, I'm a professional with value that I'm bringing into the door, and value that I'm also earning and learning from the opportunity that I have for my current job. And that changes your mindset a little bit. And it's because people become so siloed, in particular the finance industry, because of all these checks, these checklists, and the slapping of the hands. They tend to regulate people into specific roles, and so people don't feel free. And even worse is I talked about how the data gets disparate and the knowledge gets then so divided that no one really understands end to end how this all connects. So there isn't institutional knowledge by the people who work at that firm, so they don't feel the freedom to do it. But the good news is when you work on the outside, you're not bound by those constraints, and you can start thinking about things very differently, and you're encouraged to connect the dots yourselves, and even the freedom to be wrong. So I know this is a long-winded answer, but just to go into the mobile app experience. So I lost $80,000 one year, and that was terrible. But the beauty of this is that you don't have a manager above you. You don't have a company to back you. You don't have anyone to go to but yourself. I could have spent that money at Harvard and I wouldn't have learned as much. But you have to have professional humility.
Yeah.
So there's the waiter way of addressing customers' concerns. You want your steak medium well, you want your eggs sunny side up, and okay, let me just write all this down. Okay, this will be precisely this way. And then there's also understanding the intent and their business. And there's that's the difference between what I call a project manager, the former, or a product manager, the latter. And they even tested it, and they paid me, right? And so we had the whole thing roll out. And I remember telling them, like, hey, can you check some of your 17 million viewers and have them like beta test, like just walk through it? And they gave me lip service because I had no contact with their customers. Yeah, we did it. I'm like, okay, great. So then we deploy the app into the App Store. And then about 2 weeks later, they come back to me yelling at me, telling me I developed such a terrible app. It was garbage. I was scamming them. And I said, wait, I don't understand. I'm like, the functionality, is it all working? Like, I'm going through it, everything. Yeah, no, the functionality is great. I'm like, okay, does it not look nice? You guys saw it. We got it approved. No, it looks fine. I'm like, well, I don't understand. There's only 300 people who downloaded, and of the 300, only 23 like actually used it like more than once. And I said, okay, well, first of all, that's a low download rate for your 17 million viewers. I'm like, yeah, because you designed such a bad app. I'm like, bad. Well, first of all, you approved it. Like, that's what I'm saying. This is again the waiter thing. So I can say I have my butt covered by saying they approved everything, but that doesn't make the customer happy, and that doesn't make
No.
this a success. And I said to them, well, did you bother like putting an ad in front of one of the 17 million viewers on the front of one of your videos to say, hey, check out this app, download it here to let them know? No. Did you send an email like letting them know? No. They didn't do any of those things to a community they already had engaged. And my point to them is, guys, the App Store isn't like a restaurant you see down the street where you're like, oh, there's a new Mexican restaurant. Let's try it out or something. You're lost in a sea of apps that no
No.
one knows what's it about unless you promote it. So they didn't think about the adoption strategy.
Yeah.
That's such an important factor. Unless you have an adoption plan, you will not succeed. It doesn't matter how good the technology is. And that's something I think people forget. Entrepreneurs see a great idea and it's altruistic, just like mine. It's like, hey, why don't we create this one-time reconciliation activity in the cloud for client account data for the institutional accounts so that these problems don't exist anymore. But that's not the journey. Unfortunately, everyone's busy. And unless you can somehow address their selfish interest, you
Yeah.
won't arrive there, or you won't get to the Sapphire Endeavor in this case.
Beautiful. You mentioned big bangs and securing, attending lots of meetings, securing big deals, and it was just you and your brother and your co-founder. Tell me, what are some of the key lessons that you've learned from dealing with massive banks, asset managers, and people that are key decision makers in trusting in your endeavor, in your dream?
Well, there's a couple aspects. One is the information security review.
That's a good one.
You can't escape it.
Yeah.
I will say a firm that wants to be in institutional finance is going to have to make the big investment on it because there's no way you'll get the adoption unless you can pass the muster.
Of course.
And quite frankly, we hire a third party firm to cyber hack us, attack us
Really?
every year
Wow.
because there's always
Wow.
new stuff. And so far, knock on wood,
Yeah.
we get an A rating, right?
Amazing.
There's always new things. That builds trust. And it requires for you to be a little more thoughtful on how you're managing your data. You could be very rudimentary about it. There's some solutions that are just purely bilateral.
Sure.
There are other solutions that are a little more innovative, more multilateral, but that require, because when you want to get innovative and exciting about a platform, that's where you need to be thoughtful on how you're securing data, especially if you have multiple institutions coming on. So there's a whole technical answer to your question of how do you get these firms to trust you. So let's park that aside and assume that's there.
Yeah.
The challenge with the big institutions, it doesn't matter if it's the banks or buy-side firms, is the ones that have multiple departments. Because if you're just selling to one department for one thing, that's not hard. That's not too hard in terms of the politics. When you're trying to show benefits across different departments, and they all have their own budgets and they have their own solutions that they've already pursued, and now you're coming into the mix, that's a harder sell, right? And so you have situations where you have to think about the interests of different departments. Then if you're a multilateral play where you're not just selling into institutions' four walls, inside those four walls and that one department, but you're interacting with other players like Sapphire does, you have that same challenge now to marry on the other side, right?
Sure.
And if it's not, and in a lot of cases in Sapphire, it's not bilateral, it's multilateral. There's electronic trading platforms, there's custodians, there's sell sides, there's buy sides, they're the asset owners as well. That's one of the positions, is that you're evangelizing and selling not to that one client's one department, but to all the interfaces that they go off to and what's important to them. And it's different for every firm.
Absolutely.
The other thing is also the internal technology teams.
Right.
So I've worked at some of these firms. I'm not exaggerating.
Yeah.
They spend 100 times, sometimes more than the vendors, because the vendors are experts in their field.
Absolutely.
And they also, the vendors can see outside of the four walls of that firm. I told you my journey, I used to think the world worked like JP Morgan in terms of how they structure their data. And then I got educated, right? And that was only happening when I stepped outside of the firm. And so you have that spend, and God forbid you bring a solution in, and it's like, well, we were spending 100 times more, and then you could do it for this. No, there's no possible way that
Yeah.
it could be that much and do the same thing. But that's part of the challenges. The other thing, the third factor that comes into play is there are manual operation steps that occur that don't need to happen anymore. That could be smarter. I talk about the cloud piece, and still in finance, it's not well understood. We're repeating the steps even in the cloud because they're just taking the behaviors that they did today before the cloud and now just replicating it in the cloud. My brother uses a great analogy, and this is something that we avoid in Saphyre. One of the value propositions we try to bring is if you're digitizing, you know this term digitizing, you'll hear, and then you'll see these digital transformation titles for people and whatnot. And if you have a physical filing cabinet, so I give credit to Steven, my brother, because he came up with this, but if you have a physical filing cabinet in your office and all you did is take all that paper and put it in the cloud, and you still have to scroll through your mouse and click on the folder to find the document, you really didn't digitize.
No.
You've just taken the same physical manual manifestation and placed it in a digital environment. But when people mean digitizing, they mean recall. There's some type of memory to know how to use that information and for when and for what. And this is where we come into play because we normalize this data between multiple firms. I talked about the standards before. And because we start in the beginning and pre-trade at the point of inception, that's where everything is done from scratch. When you create an account and you onboard it, and then you understand all this stuff and it's repeatable, you can actually use it in the entire life cycle. So that, to me, is one of the ways of winning firms over. Why is it worth for them to entertain new technology to do something? And in this case, we're also using, let's say in the case of the banks, their clients to self-serve this information, validate it for them so they can trust it because that's actually what their clients see. And it's a way for them to validate that information against their clients and have trust in it because their clients are standing behind it.
Exactly.
So that brings in more value. And so that's why when you're developing something, you have to be more nuanced and the term I use is interoperable, but your architecture has to be truly flexible. And it can't be a talking point that you say, oh, we're interoperable. You have to demonstrably show in the ways that you are. And one more thing I also observed in gaining trust, there have been solutions out there that trap the client into an ecosystem.
Yes.
And then it's so painful to leave. And what we do is completely the opposite, is we actually make it easy to get on and get off our platform. We're explicit about it. In fact, any firm that works with us, we immediately give access to their own data. So the repository information in the cloud that's being hosted by Saphyre isn't something you're beholden to. You have your own version instantly. The difference is that we are at least still in the cloud to reconcile with your counterparties, clients, electronic platforms, and so on. So we are continuously updating you via that method, but you're never beholden or trapped into our ecosystem. And this way we have to compete based on innovation and service, not because, oh, we made the sale and now you're trapped here and you can't escape because you might make some of your customers unhappy.
That's great USP. I love that. As we're talking about technology, is there anything on the outlook or anything that you've been looking at and teaching your AI about that you think is exciting and maybe something that we may hear Saphyre may be using in the future? To the extent you're happy to share, but what excites you the most about the current state of AI and technology?
It's moving fast.
You're right.
Everyone's doing it. The problem for most firms, the challenge for most firms is if you do not groom the data that you're feeding AI, you're going to get bad results. So bad data, bad results. And what happens is a lot of these firms will set it up initially, but they're not grooming and curating that information over time. And also, I just talked about normalizing data, right? So do you have an opinion on how the data needs to be normalized, not just for your firm, but for your counterparts and the electronic platforms and the asset services that you work with? And I don't think most firms do that. They think about what my firm needs.
True.
And not the industry. So therefore, I'll give you some tangible examples, and then we'll get into more on the AI technology piece. But if you teach AI and you talk to a firm who says the word fund, I can tell you right now without naming names, Firm A, in my mind, when they say the word fund, they mean trading sleeves, which are not legal entities. These are the edited trading sleeve that gets 40% returns a year. And then the Gabino trading sleeve that doesn't make the same. It gets you 12% returns, but you won't lose your money, right? And so this firm will sell their trading sleeves and those portfolio managers to a asset owner, a pension fund who will subscribe to that. Okay. And then there's another type of buy-side firm that says the word funds, and they mean general partnerships, limited partnerships, special purpose vehicles, right?
Absolutely.
And so when you say the word fund to an AI, does it know?
No.
If it reads a document, if it reads a data point that says fund, is it going to distinguish between the two? Or have you already normalized the data for firm A versus firm B and know that when they say fund, it's this structure. When firm B says fund, it's this other structure. You have to have a normalized data structure in order to successfully deploy AI, at least in the institutional finance space. So the exciting things are actually allowing clients. Well, for one, we're today pre-filling, I think there was like 150 accounts,
Wow.
300 documents for each account,
No way.
pre-filling all the documentation. 90% of the information for the asset owner or investment manager is pre-filled now.
Wow.
Okay. Saving a ton of time. And this is because you go through learnings of actually understanding your client's needs. This is what I mean by earlier about the waiter, where I could just take the requirements and we could just do the basics, or I can do intelligent automation recall and leverage a normalized data model so that AI can actually really create exciting outcomes. And therefore, the way you actually deploy the use of AI is actually very important, as opposed to a very blind scan of an entire document to do a bunch of things. The other thing around the AI component is the memory usage. So everyone just think it's magical, but there's like literally cities worth of energy power being used to power these data centers for to perform these activities. And even when you subscribe to Microsoft or whoever to the their services, there's a limit. And when you hit that limit, the AI will create more errors. So if you're trying to do too much thinking or interrogation by the AI, it's actually worse. And then folks will also, try to get ahead of that by saying, 95%, we don't have to go 99% accuracy. We can go to 95%. But believe me, in finance, I don't know about other industries, but in finance, that's a galaxy apart if you do that in terms of the accuracy of data. The other thing that we're seeing is ingesting unstructured emails. So if I don't feel like signing into another portal and I just want to send an email out or whatnot, how we ingest those emails, generate STP completely and respond back. And the beauty of this is that, again, if you were to try to take this challenge on, you have to create a normalized data model for investment manager A, B, and C versus broker-dealer A, B, and C versus custodian A, B, and C.
Right.
And then when you do that and you understand how that interaction works, you have a normalized data model that the AI can then interpret the data it receives and know the rules from each and respond back and forth in email, right? Even though the UI can provide a great experience, that's one of the exciting things that we're seeing. And then creating repeatable patterns of sensitive account information, how we redistribute it without there's a process called callbacks. So I don't want Edita to put her own personal routing and checking account number in the settlement of some of these trades. So how do I authenticate Edita? And when we go through this process, ensure AI isn't making a mistake on the correct account numbers. So there's this whole process that we do. We have 6 authentication methods, but on top of that, even though AI was employed, we have a maker-checker process where the AI is the maker, but then we have checkers that are humans that are dedicated to actually checking that on an instant basis. But you are eyeballing it and you're like, yep, that's correct. Now we can commit it to memory and it's no touch. That's the whole idea behind it. So those are some of the exciting things.
Amazing. Thank you for sharing. I wanted to ask you a few more questions before we close, if that's okay.
Yeah.
What's your biggest victory?
Oh. It may not sound as exciting to people, but I'm a little bit of a geek. So if I had my way, I'd be tinkering and building product because I like to solve things and just for people to enjoy it. My brother's more on the marketing and sales side. I'm more I understand the operations and technology. And the biggest breakthrough, the biggest victory for me was this is going back into end of 2018 into 2019. So I was struggling with actually pitching the value proposition end to end. Oh yeah. It still exists today, by the way. Not everyone's bought in. I mean, the celebrations we have make it sound great, but evangelizing the end-to-end value proposition is still a struggle. But what I mean by this is that I understood how to finally connect asset servicer data, security services data from custodians,
Yeah.
fund accountants, outsourced middle offices, with broker-dealers or capital markets firms, investment managers, and asset owners.
Right.
And one of the ways I did it is that I started understanding how SSI data was assembled and how it was associated to everybody. And I worked with my team to create a model for this.
Wow.
And I actually sent a message to everyone. I said, remember, this date was July 2018. I said, I've determined it with the team, but we figured it out and we can make this work. This is where everyone told us we were wasting our time. This is before the big press releases that we had, by the way.
Wow.
But I said, this will pay us dividends because now we can build a scalable model for the industry. And I was super excited, but it was like cheering in an empty room. Right? Because everyone's
Pivotal
like,
moment,
yeah, when that happens, then let us know. But that's what I mean. That's when you had that eureka moment when you're actually tinkering and experimenting on things, and then things click and you know it works, right? So now it's just more about being patient and then finding the adoption strategy to get there. So anyways.
Amazing.
Yeah.
I need to ask you about the escalations, because obviously it is the Escalation Podcast. And when I was thinking about how to name it, it just feels like this is the industry word that everyone is using, sometimes abusing a lot. How do you deal with escalations and work under pressure? Obviously, the industry is famous for it. And we see escalations, and you mentioned at the beginning fires, that you keep trying to put down every day. How do you manage that as a CEO?
I think I'd always could do better. So I'm not going to say I'm perfect with it. So there's a dichotomy here, because what you're going to hear from most people is like, you got to hire good people. And clearly everything can't be me. So I didn't build this on my own.
Yeah.
I have friends and family who investors who professional investors and founding employees, employees since then who make this all happen. So I will say, one, for myself, for me personally, is I just need to know to be patient and to be okay that things aren't resolved right away and that they all have their own clock. And certainly there's things that you got to speed up and you can't necessarily wait.
Yeah.
But I become focused on one thing at a time and laser beam focused to solve that thing before I move on to the next fire, right? So that's very, very important to me. So that's the way I handle it. And to be quite frank, like, it's dark for an entrepreneur. You're very effusive and very kind, and to speak to me this way. My brother was my biggest cheerleader. You got to remember when I worked at JP Morgan, doors opened for me. When I started Saphyre, no one knew what it was, and it was getting hanged up, doors slammed. And you and your husband have founded your own company. I know that you appreciate this, and it takes a lot of perseverance and persistence. And then it requires coaching and support on merit, not fake. And when I say on merit, like, where you can do this, but you gotta fix this, you gotta change this, and that takes a certain amount of humility, professional humility I talked about before. And I say this in the context of, like, when you have all these fires and how you handle the escalations, and people just want to blame others, or and they're not realizing the limitations of their abilities and their teams. And what's reasonable, and to understand that things have their own gestation periods. So and then the other thing I will say, and maybe it's odd to say, but it's prayer. Like, for me, this is serious. Like, and I don't think I got here on my own energy. Okay, I think people think it's cheesy. I'm going to tell you, it's real.
It's real. It's real.
It's real.
Absolutely.
And
we manifest our reality.
Correct. Yes.
Totally.
I don't think people realize that granted, you got to put some physical effort and mental effort, but you believe and you put your heart and soul into something, it really does come true.
100%.
And this world isn't it. We only see, I think they said, like 0.003% of, like, the visible light. There is other things at play. And there's so much in this journey. There's so many good people that make this happen. So anyways, the escalation piece, which is the whole you're getting at, is that I just know that there's something else out there. And I always tell myself, it's going to be good. It's going to be taken care of. And I'll leave it at that with one more exception, which is my team. I view myself as infusing enthusiasm and energy into them. Okay.
Yeah.
And so I can't possibly do this alone. When there's escalation, these fires, they have to believe it too. And
Exactly.
I make my brother laugh sometimes because he's like, "Oh, how did you get this person so excited?" and all this stuff. I'm like, sometimes I just give this individual my undivided attention and infuse in them some excitement and my belief in them so that they believe in themselves. There's leaders who issue commands,
Yes.
but they don't inspire. And the ones that listen and focus so that you feel like you're the only person in the room to your employees, you'd be surprised the magic they can do so that when the escalation path happens, you're not doing it alone. So,
And I've got one more question that I thought I would ask, because you mentioned, I may just dive into that now, because you mentioned your energy. And every time I watch you on social media, it's just fascinating for me. You have this crazy schedule. You meet people all over the world. You pitch to people on a daily basis. Where and how is that energy coming from? Can't be copied.
No, I'm a little bit of an adventure boy, a little bit of a geek, and love my
I
Lord of
love
the
it.
Rings, love
Yes.
my X-Men when I grew up, the comic books. And to me, I always imagine this cartoonish fantasy type of quest I'm on.
My God.
And so if you're on a quest and you're
Yeah.
bringing people along, you got to convince them that it's worth the
Sure.
journey, right?
Yeah.
And that's honestly what I think in my head, as cheesy as it may sound. And when I see other people try to do the same or they're on a journey, I want to help them because I know I've been on that journey sometimes by myself. And so,
That's
anyways,
great.
that's where that comes from. I think.
Thank you. That's such a beautiful ending to our conversation. I think you are one of the most amazing leaders we have in fintechs at the moment. So thank you for taking the time, for sharing, for being here today. I know you had a crazy couple of days,
Yeah.
if not weeks.
This was worth it.
So thank you. Really appreciate it. And
Thank you.
hope to see you soon again.
You will.
Thank you.
Thanks.